am the Vice President of Nutrition and Communication for Green Juju. And if you're watching this live for the first time, thank you so much for coming. And if you're one of our loyal customers who comes back monthly to get tips and ask questions, we appreciate you so much. So tell me, other person sitting across from me, who are you?
I am Kelly. I am the head manager of Billy's fan club.
That's good. That's very good. That's very good.
An
It's
honor. It's a hard job. I do my best.
it's not very often that I am left speechless, so I commend you for that. Um, Thank you. Hi to Beth, who just came in, and if you do end up joining us, please let us know you're here. It's really cool for me and Kelly to be able to see the same people coming back and new people. And so let us know you're here, where you're from. If you're from a store, we really appreciate you guys and would love to know that you're here. So, Kelly, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we are going to talk about Bam's Beets because this old girl is turning 13 in a couple weeks. And so it felt like the right time to honor a product with her name. This is also a product that we launched, within the last year. And it's not one of our, it's something that you can learn a lot about and something that we have a lot to tell you about. So we're going to talk about it today.
Yeah, and I would say and we'll talk about why I consider it this, but one of the things that comes to mind when you say there's always stuff to learn about it is, there are things in nutrition I think you can do to take leaps and to do products that are new and exciting and just kind of a whole different concept. I think this fits into that category.
Yep. All right. So let's start off. I'm going to interview you and then kind of throw in my own 2 cents here and there. So,
Sure.
what is Bam's Beets?
Can I just say, first of all, before I answer that question, we are in two totally different places, but I think our backgrounds actually look kind of similar to each other to some
I
degree
was
with the
going to tell you,
windows.
you should use that background more often. It looks
Oh,
really
okay. Yeah. Well, this is conference room 3, so I will no 4. So I will keep that in mind. So, so uh, Bam's Beats is a multifaceted product. So how we make Bam's Beets is by fermenting beets and purple cabbage. So first of all, they're called Bam's Beets, but they're not just beets. So I think sometimes we don't talk enough about the purple cabbage in the product. So they're 50% purple cabbage, and we even add some of the brine back to that because when you ferment things in a brine, so essentially we add small amounts of sea salt uh, into the product to bring the pH down. And when you do that, the naturally existing good bacteria, those wonderful lactic acid bacteria in the beets and the cabbages themselves start to come out, and they start to bring the pH down, which is a really cool safety method because things like Listeria, Salmonella, E. coli don't grow, have a very hard time growing in low pH environments. So we wild ferment those two products, which I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about how that benefits your pet. And then so it's as simple as that process. But what we like to do at Green Juju is make multifaceted products. It's not just a probiotic, right? It's a probiotic that does X, Y, and Z. And that's the really cool benefit of using whole foods in regards to that, rather than, say just a supplement of some kind.
So let's talk about what is wild ferment. Why is wild ferment different than traditional fermentation that we know about, and why do we prefer it?
Well, wild ferment. So one of the I think one of the concepts that's parts of life that's missing for most dogs, and I would say my own dog is in the same category. He's currently at this co-working space, sitting in a chair, lounging around. Where he doesn't get very often is the woods, and he doesn't get very often is he's not eating things, he's not consuming dirt and that kind of thing. And I think that was that, in a dog's evolution and in biology, I think that lended itself to their microbiome and getting inoculated with all those types of bacteria. So one of the ways that that a wild ferment helps is it brings the outside in. It brings those soil-based bacteria and it exposes your dog to those things, which for me, as a obviously as a fermentation nerd, is very exciting because so wild ferment just means instead of inoculating it with something. So here's a good example. If you wanted to take our goat milk and make a kefir out of it, you could use kefir grains or inoculate it with a kefir, and then you're letting those bacteria grow. But you're going to get mostly, specifically, those bacteria that you just filled it with. Those are what's going to grow. In this case, it's whatever's naturally present in the beets and purple cabbage. So it provides you, I think, a really great advantage, because if you use one pouch and then you use another pouch, even from the same batch, you're going to get a different speciation, different probiotic sets in those pouches. So it's kind of like that, to me, is the future of probiotics, is how do we get them from food in many, many different species, right? And then you talk about combining that with our other products with naturally existing bacteria, and you have hundreds and hundreds of different probiotic species.
So the cool thing about that is that if you feed a probiotic supplement every day, you're giving your dog the same strains every day, and the gut is not getting as diverse of a microbiome as if you're feeding something that's wild fermented that changes with every single batch. So that's what's cool about every single batch of ours being different, or every pouch even being different from the last one. You're creating more diversity with every time you feed it. So why is Bam's Beets something that fits into the bowl every day?
So it's the cool thing about that is, so when you look at it, say its sister product that's in the Lewis fermented golden paste, that is so much. What's that?
I love that, the sister product.
You have to, which is so much more targeted, I think, towards specific issues. Mm-hmm. This is just targeted, I think, to everyday general health. So go back to what we just talked about in terms of, and thank you, Christina, for feeding Bam's Beets as this is happening. So we really appreciate that. So those are moments where I lose my train of thought. Oh yeah. So the first part is the probiotic set, in this product. So essentially, when you're using this every day, even if you're using other products, say that contain natural bacteria or that have bacteria in them, this is really a great way to, use that everyday probiotic. And I would mention too, just on that note, it's not always about the amount of probiotics. It's about how versatile they are in the gut and how well they work. And so food-based probiotics, typically work better because they're in their natural setting. Soil-based probiotics are more naturally resistant to gut to stomach acid, that kind of thing. So that's really the first thing. But the second thing that I think is my favorite part about it is the very dark sort of antioxidant colors.
Before we get into that, so I'm gonna ruin your little spiel here. I like to break it up into kind of the different parts of the body that's addressing. So like digestion, detoxification, we'll move on from that. But I think another important thing that you mentioned in the beginning is that cabbage has your favorite vitamin, right? Vitamin U, which helps with the gut lining. And so Bam's Beets helps digestion in two ways, with the probiotics, but also with the cabbage that helps with the gut lining. So I think that's an important thing to put into the digestion category.
I agree. Although vitamin U is not my favorite vitamin, but it is up there. So because it's so unknown, but I would like to make that distinction. It's clearly no vitamin K2. Let's just be honest. That's the nerdiest thing I've ever said. So
I'm actually going to take a note there.
No, that's a very, very good point. And the cool thing about that is that back when they used to do more studies on food, they actually compared the substance known as vitamin U, which is naturally present in cabbage juice, and obviously in this case fermented cabbage and cabbage brine, and compared it to ulcer medications and found really good results with healing ulcers. And so
Like
that's
100 years ago.
yeah, that's when they used to actually, pay money to do studies with food. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, you know, just supporting that digestive lining is so important because it's a thin little layer there, and we know a lot of dogs suffer from things like leaky gut and that kind of stuff.
And that's the commonly the root of most allergies and food sensitivities. So if you can keep a healthy gut, you can keep a lot of those things at bay.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want me to move on from there? Okay. So moving back to the antioxidant support. If you look at BAM's beets, you notice a very dark, almost like purple color, in terms of the product itself. And we know that in nature, the darker the antioxidant color, typically the more active, say in a food like blueberries or something like that. So you're kind of in that same antioxidant color sphere. And so this is just like a super concentrated version of that antioxidant support, which for those of you that use the blends, this is a great everyday use with the blends as well, because not only is it going to kind of help to co-support when it comes to those antioxidants, but also it will provide the bacteria that the blends will feed, because there is no product on the market that comes close to providing the quality of fiber that Just Greens, Bailey's Blend, and Golden Blend provide. And so that can be part of it as well. And then you also have the vitamin and mineral profile as well of all of those. So right now we're already into 3 or 4 different categories in terms of everyday support. I know one of the things that you love about them has to do with the liver. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so beets are amazing for liver support and detoxification. Um, they are one of the best foods to support the liver. And way back in the day when I used to make seasonal blends, I had a beet blend in the fall. And the reason that I kept it, it was just like a 6 week thing. And the reason I kept it so short is because we don't want to feed our dogs as much sugar as we get from beets typically. But the beauty of BAM's beets is that when we ferment it, we break down those sugars to pretty much a negligible level. And so you're getting all the benefits from beets and you're getting all that great detoxification support, but without the sugar. So you can feed it on a daily basis and you can get all those benefits, but you don't have to worry about the sugar.
Yeah, and that's a really nice thing, because basically the bacteria that are pre-processing the food, that's their food, is the sugar. And in that process, what a lot of people don't consider as well is that a byproduct of that is extra enzymes. Yeah, is the sound weird?
No, the garage door went up downstairs.
Oh, okay. I was like, what is that? Is that me? Um, so those bacteria produce extra enzymes, so the food is easier to digest. Total diet's easier to digest. They produce extra vitamins, especially B vitamins, highly bioavailable ones, and extra organic acids like acetic acid, which is great for helping blood sugar not to spike, and those types of properties. So it's all in all, it's sort of a win-win when it comes to all those different things, in regards to that. I feel like there's something that I was going to ask you about that we were missing, but so far we've covered the amazing wild ferment probiotics, the wonderful antioxidant content, all of those vitamins and minerals that are typically associated with root vegetables and those kind of more earthy vegetables. Talked about the reduced sugar content. Um, and so one of those things, the main sort of point I want to make here with all this is that the reason why this is an everyday supplement is because it's so multifaceted, and because you're basically doing whole body support. And so it doesn't matter if you are If you are Kelly, who has an almost 13-year-old dog, or if you're me, who has a dog that's less than a year and a half old, they're going to benefit from the supplement every single day. And the reason why is because it's multifaceted. So it almost operates, when you're using foods, they operate as food, which is to say they do more than one thing. And that's one of the beauties of our products in general, is you can combine all of these different products because they're whole foods. And because typically when you're using whole foods, the way that dogs and cats evolved, the way that we evolved in eating all of these foods together. And so typically they even have a better benefit when they're used together. And you're not worrying about, toxicities and things like that, because they're from actual foods. You're not worried about, too much vitamin D from your vitamin D supplement or something like that. So, and I think too, and this is just going to be a little, what do you call it? Where you like a little teaser. I think people are going to be really happy about, we're very interested in the science behind how plants work for dogs, and how that works, and figuring more about that. So I think people are going to be really happy about something to do with that soon. So just remember.
Coming up.
What's that?
We have so much fun stuff coming up.
Yes, in many, many different ways. So it's a very exciting year for Green Juju. And so, Kelly, I'm going to switch this around a little bit.
Hold on.
And yeah.
Okay. I just want to say I have a question for you, and I want to say something. The one thing I want to say is that one of the really cool thing about Bam's Beets and Lewis Golden Paste is that since they're so condensed and concentrated, you only use a really small amount every day. So one of those little pouches, a 6-ounce pouch, could last up to 30 days for a, medium to small size dog. But you don't have to use a lot. I mean, the serving sizes are like half a teaspoon or a teaspoon. So you get a lot of bang for your buck with these supplements. And then the thing I was going to ask you is, how would you recommend people incorporate using Bam's Beets with the blends, or, any diet that they're feeding, or just in general?
How would I incorporate Bam's Beets? So I find that typically the suggested dose for, if you just look at say you're using our blends, if you're just looking at the suggested dose on the blends versus the beets themselves, it's about 3-to-1, I believe, somewhere right around there in terms of the amount you're doing. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be the best ratio. I think it doesn't really matter if you are feeding a raw diet. It doesn't matter if you're really feeding kibble or anything like that. And I think too, it doesn't matter what product you're using of ours. Personally, I always recommend starting at the recommended dose, regardless of what diet you're doing. Because what we're finding is that because our stuff is low carbohydrate, so if you're looking at the beets, they're going to be very low in carbohydrates because they're fermented. I might sneeze, just FYI. I've been on the precipice of it for a little while now. So if I'm off, that's why. You just give me, here, Kelly, fill the time for a second.
You've been on fire today.
I know.
Okay, clear. I'm going to answer your question. So Austin is having surgery on Thursday, and the vet is likely going to want to put her on some pain meds. Supplementing with Bam Beets recommended for liver support. I definitely would. I think liver support is a great thing for post-surgery pain meds. I might give Austin a day or two to recover from the surgery before incorporating it, but I absolutely would get that on board sooner than later. And then there's a question about oxalates. The fermentation also reduces the oxalates, so that's not a concern when feeding fermented beets. 2
things on that. Number one,
you're back.
Yes, I did not have to sneeze, as it turns out. I'm doing great today. I do what I can. So the first thing is, oxalates, I think, typically can be a little bit overblown. I mean, it's an issue, but especially when you're talking about dogs, you're talking about not feeding that much of the overall diet. So I think sometimes in nutrition, people take concepts and run with it, and it's not a really as big a deal as people think. However, there are some dogs that would be more sensitive to that. Fermentation reduces oxalates by up to 70%. So heavily reduces the oxalate content. So all of you that are watching that are concerned with that, this is the way to feed beets. Just generally, there's no real negatives to fermentation in this case.
And think about if they're reduced by 70%, and this is, say your dog eats a cup and a half of whatever food a day, and you put a teaspoon on top of it. This is a very, very small amount in their overall diet, but they're still getting a big benefit from those fermented beets and cabbage.
Yeah, and I do want to address what you asked me before, because I felt like because I had to sneeze, there was a bit of word salad there. So I highly recommend, in terms of BAM's Beets or any of our products, I highly recommend starting with the recommended dose on the carton or on the pouch and or container, because what we're finding is that dogs probably need more vegetables than we think they do, and that's going off some of the stuff we talk about with animal biome and some of the stuff that they've looked at. Is that's now every dog is going to be different, so that doesn't mean you won't have to adjust it. However, it is always a good starting place. So what I mean by that is, if you're feeding a raw diet that has vegetables, still good to start at the recommended dose and then work from there. And that's where I've seen the most benefit in terms of doing that and diversifying the diet, because all dogs need more of a diverse diet, and this is a great way to do that with any of our products, but especially on the beet side of things as well. And the other part too is that it's really cool because you're getting all this added benefit from this concentrated product, but it's like almost no calories. So, you're putting this amount on there, and you don't really have to factor that into their overall calories or anything like that with really any of our vegetable products, but especially BAM's Beets. So hopefully that was better. I did my best. I mean, I really did.
Like I said, you're on fire today. Okay. Switching it around.
Yes, so we're gonna switch this around a little bit. I might have. So me and Kelly are in opposite situations. So Kelly has a lovable senior, and super senior, which is totally a different experience. Me going from Lua to Huckleberry is two totally different things, and just been so interesting to me in terms of how I feed Huckleberry versus how I fed Lua, because it can be such a different experience. But also we know that French Bulldogs in particular are prone to a lot of health issues and are particularly prone to not growing as old as we'd probably like them to. So what I'm wondering, Kelly, is if you have over the years in loving Bam and feeding her and developing this company, what are some tips you might have for someone, say in my case, or someone out there listening that might want to have a healthier lifespan and more longevity?
First, I will say she'll be 13 in a couple weeks. I am savoring every single day with her. I know that she's far past how long Frenchies typically live, and anything could happen. So every single day is a gift with her. That being said, I expected Bailey to live to 17, 16. I just thought it was a given. I was shocked when she got cancer at 9, and when she passed at 13, I still was kind of shocked. And I didn't expect a bulldog to be as active. And I mean, Bam still goes on several mile walks with me and jumps over logs down the beach, and she's still very active in the 1 hour a day she's awake. So it's kind of, I guess it shows you what to have about expectations. But the things that I think that I implemented and did early on with Bam that I believe have made a difference. My vet keeps telling me has made a difference. I put her on a raw diet when she was 3, and she was doing fine, but I switched Bailey, so I switched her at the same time. So she's been on a raw diet for the past 8 years. One of, I think, the most crucial things I did for her, and I would recommend for anybody with a bulldog breed. When I was a dog walker, there was another dog walker who had a client who was a giant English bulldog, and he was 14 or 15, and he went to the park every single day. I was like, how is this dog going to the park every day? And she said that the dog's pet parent was a chiropractor and gave him adjustments regularly. And so to me, that clicked. I was like, oh, bulldogs, have typically fragile spines. And luckily, our holistic vet, she does chiropractic adjustments with every treatment. So Bailey would go in when she had cancer. She would go in every 4 to 6 weeks for her, treatments, checkups, whatever. And I would just bring Bam along for a chiro. And my vet typically sees older dogs that need really intensive care, but I just got Bam in and going regularly from a young age when she was perfectly healthy. And so she was getting these chiro adjustments way before she ever ran into any problems. And I think that helped keep her spine really healthy. And then the food that we fed her helped keep inflammation down, which is also a big factor in spine health. So I think what has gotten us to having a healthy, active dog at this point has really just been preventative care, which I think is a tough sell when you have a healthy dog. Like, why go make the appointment? Why spend the money? Why do this? But I think it's helped. And also health insurance. Health insurance has made all of this possible because we only pay for 10% of our appointments. So I highly recommend health insurance to anybody and everybody that has a dog.
Yeah, and I know personally, Lua was doing, towards the end of her life, was doing a lot more chiropractic, and that made a huge difference. And so, I focus, almost all of my thoughts on the nutrition aspect, but there's so much more to it as well. I know even for having my young dog, the mainstay of Huckleberry's exercise is walking a little bit over a mile each way to the co-working space with me, and then he hangs out at work and he walks another, so he gets over 2 miles a day typically. And he's just a different dog when I'm able to do that. And if it's not like a crazy day and I can't walk him, he's just a totally different dog in that way. And so I think there's a lot we can do beyond, the food section of it. And I love that you brought out the inflammation part of it as well, because one of the reasons, products like ours work so well in general is just reducing the overall inflammation in the diet, because I think a lot of inflammatory ratios are just hidden in products just generally, whether it be humans or dogs and cats. A good example of that would be like just off the top of my head, peanut butter is very high in inflammatory fats, versus in anti-inflammatory fats. So you'd have to balance that out. And so, all the parts of the diet help, especially in some of those unknown foods. Sorry, I'm not calling out peanut butter specifically, because I actually love peanut butter, but I'm just, it's just the example. So peanut butter lovers out there, I'm not calling you out.
My vet and I always talk about how Bambi did not win the genetic lottery. Like, she actually has quite terrible genetics. Just knowing where she came from and having not known better at the time. But we believe that through food and lifestyle actions and stuff like that, we've been able to steer her in a good direction. And so far. Another thing I think is really important is you mentioned walking Huckleberry to the co-working space, and I assume that's probably on leash, as most cities or towns, as you would call it, have rules for. But I'm a big believer in letting her be off leash and just letting her sniff places. So we go into the woods or wherever we can do that safely. Because at her age, like, she's not playing fetch or anything or really seeing a lot of other dogs, but like that mental stimulation of being able to sniff, I think is super, super important for them, and just kind of keeps her world a little more interesting.
Oh, for sure. We're still working on that part because he's a little bit of a maniac in terms of I don't exactly know what to expect when. I will tell you one funny story about being off leash. So Lua would do hiking all the time off leash, and when she was getting older, one time we were on a hike here in Pennsylvania, and she was on the trail with me, and it was basically a trail that was like this, and then there was a drop off down here into a river, and she was fine and walking, and there was a log in the way that you'd have to kind of step over, and throughout her life she would either jump over it or I'd pick her up and put her over it, and she, for whatever reason that time, just decided to go left and then started going down, and then she was like, I'm just going to commit to this, and just jumped off the ledge into the river, and it was like 20 feet down.
What?
And keep in mind she's like 14 at the time, and Emily like collapses because she's like worried,
Yeah.
and she just stuck into the sand and then looked up at me, and I had to go down and get her, and she was totally fine. But it was like a 20-foot jump down to this river. It was the craziest thing.
We had a similar thing with Bam. She jumped off a log onto a beach full of like driftwood. This was, I mean, this could have gone very badly, but somehow her legs got stuck just in between logs, and she just sat there and waited for us to come get her. But
yeah,
could have gone bad.
So every time we go by that spot now, we know that as Lewis spot. But so so those are great tips. I think the main thing too for me is preventative is the biggest part of it. And in my case, I'm like, I look at my dog and I go, he doesn't have any overt health issues. Yes, I have to feed him a certain way because he's got those Frenchy genetics, but he doesn't have any issues. And so it was such a shock to go back to that, but that doesn't mean we're not preparing him for the future. He is my daughter's best friend, and so I do need to keep him healthy forever. Basically, he's not allowed to ever get old or die, so that's one of the things. And so I think for those watching, that's very important in terms of looking to the future.
I was really fortunate to have Bailey to bring this awareness to me and to put me on this path and to be able to take care of Bambi in this way. So yeah, if it weren't for Bailey, I just wouldn't have known all these things, and I wouldn't have done this. And I'm super grateful that at 13, Bailey was old. She was weathered, and she was happy, but she was struggling. And Bambi's just fine. So it's nice to not have like, even if she goes tomorrow, like she hasn't had a big decline. Like she's happy and good, and I'm super grateful for that.
That's a big thing. I remember about maybe 4 months or something before Lua passed away, we went on a baby moon, and she hiked 5 miles with us.
Yeah.
So she was, she went on her own terms. And by the way, Stacy says Bam's Beets always added to the late night snack. That's a great way to do that as well. I mean, there's all sorts of great ways to feed Bam's Beets to your pet. I know that sometimes, I might do, if he needs a little something extra, I might do some yogurt and Bam's Beets or just whatever, however you want to do that. It's also kind of fun to get into these non-traditional schedules a little bit with dogs, in terms of their nutrient consumption, whether it's, giving them a late night snack, or whether it's, feeding them some of your own food while you're cooking, or whatever it might be, to get some of these kind of extra nutrients in there. So I think we're going to go ahead and call this one. So thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it. As per usual, everybody watching this now and afterward, we genuinely appreciate you. And I think I'll speak for you on this one, Kelly, but I think we're some of the luckiest people in the world to be able to get to do what we do and to be able to make these products. And it really comes down to, our distributor partners and our retail partners and all of you watching this that use the products. You allow us to do what we do, and you trust us with your pet's nutrition, and we really can't tell you how much that means. So thank you so much for doing that. Is there anything you want to mention, Kelly?
You did say that very well. Every day, I can't believe I actually get to do this for work, and I am so grateful for everybody's support and you know encouraging us to keep moving and doing new things.
Absolutely, and look for very, very new and exciting things coming in 2023 for Green Juju. So everybody have a good day, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.